Hello everybody, welcome back to another video from Anglo Election Insights, where today we're going to look at the Tasmanian state election coming up in about a week and a half's time. Seems like it's on a knife edge, but I'm going to try and make some predictions and map out a few different possibilities because this one is really tough to pick. Okay, so just a quick reminder, you can pause here if you want to have a look in more detail. This is the current composition of Parliament when the no confidence motion was successfully passed, and you can see who voted yes and who voted no. So let's jump straight into it. Let's look at some polling. Firstly, I've got 6 polls here. I don't know the full details of all of them, but those are the numbers. I'll just run you through what's kind of happening at the bottom here, and these are all top line. I haven't bothered with the sub-samples at the electorate level, but the Liberals here polling just over 32% on average, but that does seem to be strengthening as time goes by. Labor kind of topping out at about 30%. The Greens in the mid-teens, 14%. The independent vote is at 17% currently. That seems very high. And some commentators and poll watchers such as Kevin Bonham have basically suggested that it's unlikely that those numbers actually will bear out. So we'll keep that in mind. And for this election, others could mean a few different things depending on the pollster. Sometimes the Nats and the Shooters, Fishers, Farmers were named in polls, sometimes they weren't. Going back to the final wave of like normal mid-cycle EMRS polling that included JLN, so don't worry too much about those numbers. The one that's interesting and is quite consistent is the preferred premier. Even if when the Liberal numbers are dipping in sort of early mid-May and then that first YouGov poll, Rockliff still has a pretty substantial lead over Dean Winter as preferred premier. And I have mentioned before that that could be, you know, the smoking gun. It really was when you look at the federal result where Albanese had a decisive lead as preferred premier, as preferred prime minister, even though some of the polls were showing a relatively tight two-party preferred race. Okay, the other little bit of info here I just wanted to show is the betting markets, which there hasn't been like very sort of comprehensive betting markets released, so we can't see what the market's thinking in terms of like seat numbers and that sort of thing. But it does appear that Labor are favoured to form government here, the Exchange, and then a couple of bookies pretty heavily in favour of Labor there. It started much closer, more like sort of 1.6, 1.7 to Labor, then it blew all the way into like 1.3, and now it's come out a little bit. So yeah, for such a close race, I'm quite surprised to see the betting markets looking this polarised, but you know, it's not often that they're wrong, so definitely something to keep in mind. So the upshot from some of these polls is basically that if you look at the polls, the public polls that weren't commissioned by some sort of third party, Labor pretty much leads in all of them, but they were taken a little bit earlier than some of the commissioned polls that show the Liberals ahead. So the 3 polls that I'm aware of that were commissioned, 2 of them, 2 waves of EMRS commissioned by the Liberals, and then that Demos AU poll, which was commissioned by some sort of peak body. I have a bit of a theory that the Liberals are trying to spin the narrative that they're ahead and make use of the tendency of Tasmanians to try and back the winning horse and get in behind whoever's more likely to form a majority. I think they're trying to abuse that principle basically by with them and their friends pushing polls that show the Liberals ahead. Could be wrong, but that's sort of my little theory on what's going on there. One thing that we did see though was the Liberal lead did increase between the 2 waves of EMRS polling. I think I keep saying EMRS, whatever. And basically since that YouGov poll which was conducted in the middle of June, Labor haven't led a poll. The seat breakdowns, obviously they're going to be pretty small sample sizes. The Liberal strength is concentrated, a lot of it in Braddon. Apparently the Liberals are pretty happy with how they're tracking in Bass, where they also have a pretty stacked ticket. And they're doing surprisingly well in Franklin. I'd pretty much written them off for retaining that third seat in Franklin, but some of the polling is showing that they could actually be doing okay in Franklin, which is surprising given that Dean Winter will be on the Labor ticket there. As I was mentioning, the high independent vote probably won't bear out, and even if it does, there's going to be a lot of independents on the different tickets, and the flow of preferences between them probably won't be that strong, so there'll be a lot of leakage. And then, as we mentioned, Rockliff is definitely the preferred leader, or preferred premier, but not decisively so, and the preferred premier question does tend to skew towards the incumbent. Dean Winter hasn't been around as leader for that long. That could be influencing those numbers. It'd be better if we had some approval numbers so we could really see what people thought of Rockliff. So here, this is sort of the meat and potatoes. I'm going to try and map out some possibilities. A decisive Labor win, I'm thinking, probably comes at the cost of some support for the Greens and some of the third parties and independents from 2024, particularly the Jackie Lamy network. But if there is a swing away from the Liberals that corresponds with Labor gains, you could see the Nats sort of come up the middle in a seat like Lyons. I have heard some reports that the Nats are making a big effort. I think Littleproud visited. So the thought was that there's a bit of that kind of low information voter that did vote Jackie Lamy last time, and their vote is up for grabs. And if the Nats can just grab enough of it, maybe that doesn't really kind of show up in the polls, but it does show up on polling day. Maybe it's very like regionally concentrated. I don't think the polling is going to be particularly accurate as far as how the Nats go. But if they do have some success, it's going to be in sort of the northern part of Lyons or the more kind of remote parts of Braddon, for example. And it's probably going to be pretty hard to see that bear out in polling. So then when we look at what a decisive Liberal win might look like, you're probably looking at Labor not gaining seats and maybe not losing a whole bunch either, but perhaps the Liberals just claim a couple of crossbench seats. And then if we get this sort of status quo type result, the sort of thing that the polling seems to be indicating, you're probably going to get an expanded crossbench, and both parties are going to be in pretty much no position to form a stable government unless they go with the Greens, but the general thought is that neither major party wants to do that. So let's look at the first possibility. This is Labor winning. I feel like this election is a bit of a race to 15. If you can get to 15 seats, you can probably form a relatively okay government with the support of 3 crossbenchers. And that's what Labor would do in this scenario. So if the betting markets are right, if that sort of residue from the federal election is still there, and if it turns out people are just pretty much sick of the Liberals, this is probably what it's going to look like. So I've got the Liberals here on 10 seats with just managing to get a third in Braddon, but missing their second in Clark. There would be a possibility that they could win a third in Bass as well, but in this scenario, I think the crossbench does quite well at the expense of the Liberals, which would allow the Nats to win a seat in Lyons potentially, Garland to retain, and Rebecca Pentland to retain her seat, or maybe another independent in Bass. I'd have to have another look at the ticket. But obviously Labor do quite well. They basically gain a seat in every division, and that's sort of their ticket to victory here is just increase their vote by sort of 5% or something like that and get another seat in every division. That's how they win. The Greens, pretty much status quo result for them. It'd be sort of hard to pick what would happen in Franklin, but I would imagine, from what I understand, O'Byrne's support is quite stable, even though maybe he benefited from some union support back in 2024 that has potentially shifted, particularly with Jess Monday on the ticket in Franklin for Labor. But I've heard his support is pretty sticky. And in this scenario, I guess Labor beats out Peter George for the final seat. And yeah, the Greens probably keep their second seat in Clark, but yeah, again, the Liberals lose their second seat. Okay, so then on the flip side of that, we've got a decisive Liberal win. So this one puts them on 16 seats, which, that'd be a very good result for them. They'd be very happy. Labor going nowhere on 10. 10, possibly 11. I think I might have made some edits and it's actually 11. The Greens on 5, so that would be status quo for them with them missing out in Braddon, and 4 independents. Or actually, okay, so that's what's happened. Should be 3 independents and 11 Labor in this scenario. Okay, so Rockliff and Archer able to carry the Liberals to 4 seats on in Bass and Braddon, with Labor only winning 2. Garland able to hold his seat against a potential like Greens challenge, or even like a third Labor seat, or maybe one of the other potential independents or the Nats or someone like that. In Lyons here, the polling hasn't showed massive Liberal strength here, and I do feel that that federal result for Labor was really strong, and even in this scenario they might still have a chance to win a third seat, but otherwise that could still go to someone on the crossbench as well. Franklin, I would have the Liberals potentially narrowly retaining their third seat, and then the final seat would come down to, can Labor win a second one, or would Peter George win? And I guess I'm not sure in this scenario who out of Peter George and O'Byrne gets up. It's sort of hard to pick exactly what the machinations are without being close to the ground there in Outer Hobart, but hopefully that makes a bit of sense. And then Clark is basically just status quo pretty solidly. So this is kind of like my central model. It features 2 toss-up seats in Bass and Braddon, but I would have the Liberals pretty comfortably retaining 12 seats, and then most likely to win a 13th in Lyons. Then I'm guessing it's these 3 seats here in the middle that would basically decide what happens. Could the Liberals win a 4th in Braddon? Could Labor win a 3rd in Bass? Lyons, does someone from the crossbench sort of come up the middle here? And that would have a lot of implications as to which of the major parties would have the most amount of seats and would actually be able to form government. But basically this would result in potentially a larger crossbench, or at least a similarly large crossbench, particularly depending on what happens in these 2 toss-up seats. But for me, it gives the slight edge to the Liberals, but as I make clear here in my last point here, I'm not certain that the public polling is actually giving us an accurate picture of the electorate, and I would actually be quite surprised if we didn't get a fairly decisive result either way. Some of the other points I wanted to mention, it seems that Labor has a natural advantage in Hobart. They always have, but that's being undermined this time by some pretty strong independent challengers and incumbents. So people like David O'Byrne, people like Peter George, Christy Johnson, those sorts of characters, they're basically meaning that it's hard for Labor to extend their advantage over the Liberals and win sort of 3 seats. They're basically just neck and neck, 2 and 2, even though the voter base and ultimately the MPs that they elect will be much more progressive than in the north. The Liberal victory basically comes through, can their strong tickets in Braddon and Bass win them 4 seats? Because if they can, there's definitely pretty much no way Labor could form government in my mind. But then conversely, if the Liberals have weakness in the regional seats, which is certainly what played out during the federal election, then I can see the crossbench becoming quite large and diverse. I suppose there's a chance that maybe, Labor win I don't know, could they win 4 seats in a place like Braddon or Bass? It doesn't seem likely to me. I guess it's possible if there's a big swing on, maybe. But if the Liberals are weak, I think that kind of opens up the crossbench rather than Labor sort of hurtling towards a majority, personally. But, Tasmania's pretty hard to pick. So that's all for today. Let me know your thoughts on which of these models looks the most likely, or what you would change if it was you. mapping this one out. But thanks for having a watch. I'll be back with more coverage next week, and I've got a few other videos planned, so stay tuned. Oh, and also looks like there will be some sort of live stream happening on election night, so keep your eyes on any potential announcements on that front. But please subscribe if you're enjoying the content and you haven't done so already. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, and of course, as always, comment your thoughts below. Enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers. Bye now.